Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing 1, 2. Peter Piper 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Peter Piper 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Peter Piper 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Peter Piper 1, 2. Testing Miss Barnes. Testing Dr. Stevens. Testing Dr. Harris. Testing Miss Moss.
Test check 1, 2. Test check 1, 2. Okay. Very good. You're good to go.
Yeah.
That's it.
Good morning. A quorum being present, the Subcommittee on Early Childhood, Elementary, and Secondary Education will come to order. Welcome to today's subcommittee hearing. I'd like to thank our panel of witnesses and my colleagues for joining today's important discussion on the effectiveness of early childhood education programs. You know, a child's early development lays critical groundwork for he or she to succeed in the future. So while a parent is the ultimate decider of what is best for their own children's early development, the federal government has had a role in childhood care for over 50 years. With enactment of the Head Start Act in 1965, a byproduct of President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty, the federal government established its role helping promote healthy development of vulnerable children in their earliest and arguably most important years. While Head Start provided greater access to early childhood education for vulnerable families like many Johnson-era programs, the federal government's involvement in this space has mushroomed into an overly burdensome, costly, and confusing network of programs. Today, GAO will testify on their new report, which finds the federal government provides support for early childhood services through 44 separate programs, 9 of which have an explicit purpose to do so at an annual cost of more than $15 billion. The two largest are the Head Start and the Child Care Development Block Grant programs. And we will hear that the agencies have done a better job at improving their communications and operating these programs, but that overlap, duplication, and fragmentation among the programs unfortunately remains. Finding an early child care or education program is an important decision for many working parents and families. The federal government should not be making the job of navigating the system even more difficult through a confusing maze of federal programs. Luckily for parents, states have stepped up to the plate. Recently, we have seen states take the lead in operating early childhood programs as well as increase funding for this area. For example, my home state in Indiana has launched a promising new pilot program aimed at helping low-income Hoosier children access a free, high-quality pre-K education. In 2016 alone, states increased funding by a combined $480 million in early childhood programs. Now, this is an increase of 6.8% from the previous year. And we will hear today, I assume, examples of how states are finding a better way for children and are helping small businesses innovate and improve their services to their employees. States have recognized that they are better positioned to help parents when it comes to choosing the services that are best for their child. Now, for those of us who want to see the federal government take a diminished role in deciding what is best for our children in terms of education, I think this is excellent news. States understand their local communities best and understand what works and what does not work for their children and their parents within the state. So today we will hear about the positive impacts of state-centered early childhood programs. Additionally, we will hear testimony on just how large and cumbersome federal involvement has become. I hope this conversation will help us consider how we might address the redundancies and inefficiencies throughout these programs. In short, I hope the conversation is constructive and productive. Early childhood development is a critical issue because we are talking about the future students, future citizens, and future leaders in the workforce. In short, our best assets. At the same time, we have a responsibility to reevaluate the current climate and make sure that taxpayer investments are being used effectively. I look forward to a discussion about the ways we can better meet the needs of American children, families, and taxpayers alike. So with that, I now recognize Ranking Member Polis for his opening remarks. Mr. Polis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't emphasize enough the importance of this hearing, highlighting the importance of early childhood programs. Support for our investment in making quality early childhood education a reality for every child in our country has broad support from across the political spectrum because it simply makes sense. As a father of a 3- and 5-year-old, I get to see this firsthand at home every day. Support for early childhood education spans across the ideological spectrum. According to a recent poll, 82% of Republicans and 97% of Democrats believe we should make quality early education more prevalent. It's not just the public who sees the benefit. The academic and research side results are also completely clear. The advantages of high-quality early childhood education include higher graduation rates, improved job outcomes, longer life expectancies, lower rates of criminal acts, higher attendance, and greater academic achievement. Nobel Prize-winning economist James Heckman estimates that society receives $7.30 in benefits for every dollar invested in high-quality early learning programs for at-risk kids. But despite the nearly unanimous findings about the value of early learning, our country continues to rank third to last among developed nations for enrollment of 3- to 5-year-olds. As lawmakers, I hope that my colleagues join me in finding this unacceptable. The lack of access to early childhood education is something we experience firsthand in Colorado. The Colorado Preschool Program, or CPP, helps provide preschool for at-risk kids in our state, but has a very limited number of slots. Students enrolled in our Colorado Preschool Program come from low-income families or dual-language learners or in foster care or have another variety of high-risk factors. And compared to their peers who don't participate in our preschool program, the Colorado Preschool Program students are much less likely to be held back and more likely to perform well in school even years after preschool. And while our Colorado Preschool Program is an important step and it's opening the door for many families, but it's not nearly enough. Our Colorado Department of Education estimated that over 8,000 at-risk 4-year-olds had no preschool available to them through CPP or Head Start, and many more middle class and non-at-risk kids also didn't have those opportunities. Overall in our state, only about half of our 4-year-olds are in preschool. The lack of availability and the rising cost of childcare hits working families especially hard, parents who can't afford or don't have access to high-quality childcare. I represent a district with 2 large 4-year universities and many community colleges, and I hear many stories of college students who have children who struggle to find childcare for their kids. Strong investments at the local, state, and federal level in early learning will make an enormous positive difference for our economy, for our future, and for the children. Fortunately, at the state level, both red and blue governors agree on the benefits of early childhood education. The National Governors Association included early learning support and investment in its platform for the very first time. And many states, including states led by both Republican and Democratic governors, are making bold investments in early learning with the support of federal programs like preschool development grants. These states look at the data and are making sound decisions, knowing that the data shows that the early years of a child's life truly lay the foundation for success in later years. They also see the federal government as an important partner in efforts to expand access to quality early childhood learning and improve life outcomes. Frankly, the debate about the efficacy of early learning is over. It's simply undeniable that high-quality early childhood education has lifelong benefits for kids. So, together, we now need to think creatively about how we can further support, expand, grow quality of early learning, creating more opportunities for children and for families across our country. I want to thank the witnesses for taking time out of their day to join us to help improve the knowledge of this committee, and I look forward to hearing about what more the federal government can do to help improve access to early learning opportunities. And I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I now would like to turn to the introduction of our distinguished witnesses. First, Ms. Cindy Brown Barnes is Director with the Education Workforce and Income Security Team at the Government Accountability Office. Welcome, Ms. Barnes. Dr. Catherine Stevens is a resident scholar in Education Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute. Welcome as well, Doctor. And I will now turn to Mr. Polis again to introduce our next witness.
We are very excited to have Dr. Pamela Harris with us, who is the president and CEO of Mile High Learning Center, Denver's largest and oldest provider of early care and education in Denver. They reach over 9,000 children annually with a high-quality learning centers and community outreach, including parents. She has over 25 years of experience in education with a focus on early childhood and vulnerable populations. She's directed Head Start grantee and delegate programs, most recently received an Early Head Start and Child Care Partnership grant. Dr. Harris was also instrumental in developing Colorado's Early Learning and Development Guidelines and the state's Early Childhood Workforce Plan 2020, and we're excited to welcome her here today.
I thank the gentleman, and not to be outdone, and finally, Ms. Erica Moss is the Executive Director of Close Gaps by 5, which seems self-explanatory. I'm sure we're going to hear even more about your program. I now ask our witnesses to each raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay. Let the record reflect that each witness nodded in affirmation. Before I recognize each of you to provide your testimony, let me briefly explain the lighting system, and it goes just as much as a reminder for us up here as it does for you. You each have 5 minutes to present your testimony. When you begin, of course, the light will turn green. When you have 1 minute left, it'll be yellow. And when it's red, that means I'll start gaveling you. So please try to wrap it up. And that goes the same for 5 minutes of questioning up here. So with that, I'd like to recognize Ms. Barnes for 5 minutes.
Chairman Makita, Ranking Member Polis, and members of the subcommittee, I am pleased to be here to discuss the report we are issuing today on federally funded early learning and child care programs. Millions of children aged 5 and under participate each year in federally funded preschool, other early learning programs, or child care. Historically, early learning programs focus on preparing young children for school. In contrast, child care programs subsidize these costs for low-income parents who worked. Over time, the distinction between these two types of programs has blurred somewhat as policymakers seek to make educationally enriching care available to more young children. Today, I will cover 1, the number and funding of programs that comprise the federal investment in early learning and child care. 2, the extent to which these programs are fragmented, overlap, or are duplicative, and the efforts agencies have made to address these conditions. And 3, what is known about program performance. Today's report updates previous work we did on this topic in 2012 and in 2014. Overall, we identified 44 programs and 3 tax expenditures that may provide or support early learning or child care. While the overall number is similar to our 2012 review, there are several differences due to such factors as programs ending or beginning in the intervening time period. As shown in the figure on the monitor, 9 of the 44 programs have an explicit purpose of providing early learning or child care services. That is, these services are part of their main mission. 7 of these programs focus on early learning, and 2 focus on child care. In fiscal year 2015, these programs received about $15 billion in federal funds. Some are very large, such as Head Start, which obligated nearly $9 billion that year, while most others are smaller and obligated less than $500 million each. The remaining 35 programs do not have an explicit early learning or child care purpose, but permit funds to be used for such services. For example, worker development programs authorized by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act can pay for child care to enable participants to attend these activities. And the Child and Adult Care Food Program provides nutrition assistance to young children in different settings. Regarding the extent of fragmentation, overlap, and duplication in early learning and child care, the federal investment is fragmented, meaning that these programs are administered by multiple federal agencies. They are concentrated within the Departments of Education and Health and Human Services, but 3 other agencies, 6 and 1 federal state commission are also involved. Further, some of these programs overlap one another, meaning they have similar goals and target similar groups of children. For example, 4 of the 9 programs with an explicit early learning and child care purpose target low-income children. However, overlap among programs is limited for a number of reasons. For example, some programs target very specific populations, fund different types of activities, or support early learning or child care for young children by providing food, materials, or other services rather than early learning or child care itself. It's harder to tell whether these programs are duplicative. That is, whether they provide the same services to the same beneficiaries. This is because of the many different ways the programs are structured, the wide range of allowable uses for the funds, and in some cases, the limited data on services provided. Also, the eligibility requirements differ among programs, even for similar subgroups of children, such as those from low-income families. However, HHS and education have helped mitigate the effects of fragmentation and overlap through improved agency coordination and have followed leading practices for interagency collaboration. For example, in response to needed actions GAO identified in 2012, HHS and education expanded membership of their interdepartmental work group on young children to other agencies with early learning and child care programs. The agencies have also documented their agreements, dedicated staff time to promote the goals and activities of this work group, and issued joint policy statements. In terms of program performance, we found that agencies assess performance for all 9 programs with an explicit early learning or child care purpose. Additionally, many programs examine common aspects of performance, such as school readiness. In conclusion, multiple agencies administer the federal investment in early learning and child care and have improved their coordination of these programs. Thank you. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes. Dr. Stevens, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Rokita, Ranking Member Polis, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for convening today's hearing on opportunities for state leadership of early childhood programs. My name is Catherine Stevens, and I'm a resident scholar in education policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, where I lead AEI's early childhood program. My research is focused on the science of brain development and its implications for early care and education policy, especially the role of early learning and expanding opportunity for low-income Americans. The views I offer today are mine alone. Before my current position at AEI, I worked for 9 years in higher education, followed by 15 years in K-12 school reform. Having worked at every level of the education continuum, I have come to believe that early childhood is perhaps the most exciting and crucial area of U.S. domestic policy. So it is a special honor for me to testify before the subcommittee today on this topic. As is now widely known, a growing body of scientific research has established that the first 5 years of life are the most crucial period of human development. What we also know is that the education process is cumulative. Each stage builds on the prior one, and research shows that, in fact, gaps between higher and lower income children emerge long before children start school. Many children enter school unprepared to succeed, and research shows that schooling largely does not close those initial gaps. Improving the well-being of America's youngest, most vulnerable children is crucial to both their life chances and our nation's future. Yet even as science underscores the importance of early childhood, federal policy has lagged behind. Since 1935, the federal government has supported early care and education for poor children and still has a critical role. But the policymaking legacy of the past 80 years has left us with 2 core problems. The first problem is that integrating disparate federal funding streams to best serve children and families at the state and local levels is difficult at best and often impossible. Not all states are equally committed to improving early care and education, but those that are working hard to do so find their efforts hampered by current federal policy. The second problem is that federal programs strongly reflect the commonly made but false distinction between childcare and early education. Research has established that young children are continuously and rapidly learning wherever they are and from whomever they're with, starting at birth. We've long thought of school as where children learn, but the reality is that every environment, whether home, school, or childcare, is a learning environment for young children. In fact, childcare is unique among early childhood programs precisely because it serves multiple purposes. By promoting the complementary aims of adult responsibility and self-sufficiency on the one hand and healthy child development on the other, childcare offers a valuable strategy for two-generation human capital development in America's most disadvantaged communities. We know that family and child well-being are inextricably linked. Indeed, today's early care and education programs must have two purposes: supporting parents' work in a 24/7 economy and advancing children's healthy growth and learning during the most crucial period of human development. But current federal policy fails to realize the significant potential of this dual generation approach to help children and their parents move ahead at the same time. Federal early childhood programs still play a key role in addressing inequality of opportunity and lack of economic mobility for disadvantaged children. But the context has changed enormously since our major federal early childhood programs were first put into place. Unlike half a century ago, today, the strongest leadership in early childhood is emerging from forward-looking states. The best path now for federal policy is to build on this growing state momentum by identifying, supporting, and highlighting the work of leading innovative states. Our goal should be to amplify the impact of currently siloed programs aiming to build states' capacity to support low-income working families and give America's most vulnerable young children the strong start they need to thrive. In closing, I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony before this subcommittee on such an important topic. I look forward to your questions.
I thank the doctor. Dr. Harris, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Rakita, Ranking Member Polis, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today about early childhood programs. As Mr. Polis said, I am an early childhood education provider in Denver, and we work in the most impoverished neighborhoods there. We have an enormous responsibility. Children are born with 100 billion neurons. That's as many stars as are in the Milky Way. And it's through interactions with responsive, caring adults that children thrive. 85% of brain development occurs before a child even enters kindergarten, and delays in development appear as early as 9 months old. And if a child's not reading proficiently in 3rd grade, they're 4 to 6 times less likely to graduate high school. Reaching children in their critical years, as you've heard, is very important, and it's federal early learning programs that target unique populations or specific needs that are complementary and not duplicative help us do our work. We serve 384 Head Start and early Head Start children, and our families live in poverty. By using Head Start's whole child approach, focusing on cognitive, physical, social, and emotional development while supporting their families, we can really make a difference. And this shows in our school readiness for our children. In the fall, only 60% of our children are meeting developmental levels, but by the end of the year, more than 90% are meeting those same benchmarks. Head Start is really the original two-generation program, and its model, federal to local funding, allows programs to be responsive to the specific needs of their community. We have 7 early learning centers. One serves predominantly Spanish-speaking families, one serves refugee families who speak over 20 languages, and one is in a historically Black neighborhood impacted by gentrification. Across Colorado, Head Start programs in rural and farming communities, in the mountains and on the plains and western slope and eastern plains, they're working locally to collaborate and leverage services to meet the needs of their specific families. Through the Federal Early Learning Challenge Grant that Colorado was awarded, we developed a quality rating and improvement system for licensed childcare providers using Head Start performance standards as quality indicators. 160 families in my program access child care subsidies through the Child Care Development Block Grant, CCDBG, while they're working or going to school to improve their families' lives. And in Colorado, the state has invested additional funding for subsidies to serve infants and toddlers. IDEA provides funding for early intervention services for children birth to 5. Approximately 15% of our children enrolled have disabilities, and we partner with our school district to support toddlers with delays as they transition to preschool. And the most recent federal changes in Head Start and CCDBG continue to ensure and emphasize high-quality services for children and families. However, gaps in ensuring access exist. While subsidies help defray the cost of childcare, they don't meet the full cost and don't support parents working non-traditional schedules. And due to low wages, there's a severe shortage of early childhood teachers. Turnover rates average 30%. Colorado's Early Childhood Leadership Commission, our statewide advisory board with departments of education and human services, just published an ambitious early childhood workforce plan to address these issues. The bipartisan Every Student Succeeds Act encourages greater coordination within states, requiring local educational agencies to develop agreements with Head Start. Our state plan aligns early childhood competencies for educators who are working with children from birth through age 8. And we have also benefited with Colorado within the Departments of Human Services and Education and our Head Start Collaboration Office. By successfully coordinating these federal programs at the state and local levels, Colorado has been better able to address our access and quality gaps. From discussions over the years with my colleagues from other states, it's evident that this systemic collaboration has had similar positive effects across the country. The benefits of high-quality early care and education and Head Start are clear. High rates of high school graduation, attendance at college, greater income levels, decreased need for special education services. The true importance of our work is making sure children reach their full potential and are contributing members to their communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Ms. Moss, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Erica Moss. I'm the executive director of a Minnesota-based nonprofit organization called Close Gaps by 5. We champion the use of targeted early education to close Minnesota's achievement gaps before children enter kindergarten. Our approach has come to be known by some as the Minnesota model for early learning. Beginning 11 years ago, this model was developed, piloted, and refined by a business-led nonprofit called the Minnesota Early Learning Foundation, or MELF. MELF sunsetted in 2011. Close Gaps by 5 continues to advocate for the implementation of its recommendations. MELF set out to design an early learning model that specifically addressed achievement gaps. Minnesota has some of the worst achievement gaps in the nation. The workforce benefits of closing those gaps are of particular interest to the business and community leaders supporting this effort. MELF raised $20 million in private funds and rejected appropriated government funds so it could be an independent, honest broker in the debate. MELF used the funding to pilot and evaluate an approach based on best available research, which pointed to the following core principles: start early, target resources, empower parents, and insist on quality. The approach that MELF proved effective has since been expanded statewide with the help of Governor Mark Dayton, bipartisan members of the Minnesota legislature, and a federal Race to the Top grant. The market-based Minnesota model has two primary components: the Parent-Aware Quality Rating and Improvement System, which provides good information, helping parents make informed choices, and Early Learning Scholarships, which provide resources to families who need them most. Here's how it works. Imagine you're a low-income parent in Minnesota. Because of your circumstances, your child is at high risk of falling into gaps, but you can't afford high-quality early learning. Now imagine that you learn your child is getting one of about 10,000 early learning scholarships awarded each year. This scholarship can change the trajectory of your child's life. Your scholarship empowers you. It opens the doors to any one of 3,000 proven high-quality programs that are based in schools, Head Starts, child care centers, churches, nonprofits, and homes. Rather than having someone else tell you what to do, you pick a program that fits your family's needs, your preferred location, schedule, cultural connections, and teaching approach. Importantly, the act of making that choice engages you in your child's learning right from the start. The only requirement is that your scholarship has to be used at a program that is using kindergarten readiness best practices, as measured by the Consumer Report-style Parent Aware rating system. Beyond the ratings, Parent Aware also helps small child care programs learn to adopt those kindergarten readiness best practices. Parent Aware is a completely voluntary program. It works on a reward system, not with mandates. We're continually working to refine this model, but the early results are encouraging. Minnesota children and parent-aware programs are making significant gains in kindergarten readiness measures, such as phonics, executive function, vocabulary, social competence, and early math skills. Low-income children are making even larger gains than their higher-income counterparts. We're headed in the right direction. In addition to the benefits for children, the model is helping a struggling childcare sector tap into a larger new group of scholarship-empowered customers, adopt best practices, and market improvements to a customer base that now has a new and deeper appreciation of the need for quality early education. Particularly for mom-and-pop type businesses who tend to struggle the most, all of this offers a helpful economic shot in the arm. We also see other important benefits that I've addressed in my written statement. Finally, let me just say that Minnesota's early education debate has focused on whether to invest in this flexible scholarship-based approach or in a more rigid universal pre-K model. Specifically, there is a focus on the extent to which each of those approaches is aligned to the research-based core principles I described at the beginning of my remarks. Minnesota's achievement gaps pose a huge threat to our economy, children, and communities. To address those gaps, research says we need solutions that start early, are targeted, empower parents, and demand quality. The scholarship and parent-aware approach meets those tests. Universal pre-K falls far short. It is for this reason that we continue to be strong advocates for the Minnesota model. I've provided more detail about this debate in my written statement as well. In conclusion, this is the model that we've moved forward with in Minnesota. Scholarships open doors in a flexible, empowering way. Parent Aware ensures quality improvement through rewards rather than mandates. And the winners are small businesses, our most vulnerable children in our state's economy. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Moss. We'll now turn to member questions and any statements. And I'd first like to recognize the chairwoman of the full committee, Dr. Fox, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Rokita, and I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today and sharing their expertise with us. Ms. Barnes, welcome back to the Education and Workforce Committee. You testified there's a limited overlap and duplication of federal early childhood programs. The graph you showed claimed that Head Start and Child Care and Development Fund programs serve different purposes. However, your testimony states that, quote, historically, early learning and child care programs existed separately with separate goals, but over time, the distinction between these two types of questions has blurred somewhat as policymakers seek to make educationally enriching care available to more children. If your findings indicate these programs' distinctions have blurred, then in a practical sense, does the difference between overlap or duplication matter? And as Dr. Stevens suggests, shouldn't policymakers look at the breadth of these programs in totality to determine the best use of taxpayers' funds in this space?
Again, the overlap refers to programs with the similar goals, activities, or target populations. An example of both activities and target populations of overlapping would be Head Start and preschool development grants, which target, both of them, low-income children under 5 and provide slots for early learning. An example of programs that provide the same types of activities are the Early Intervention Program for infants and the preschool grants for children with disabilities. These programs provide special education services, both of them, but they target different ages of children 5 and under. In terms of duplication, it's difficult to determine if programs are actually duplicative because they would serve the same beneficiaries and provide the same exact services. Our report discusses how there's the potential for the duplication.
Thank you. Having worked on these issues when I was in the state as the president of a community college who built a child care center on our campus and then worked in the legislature and served on Smart Start board in North Carolina, I've always been concerned about the duplication and also the expenditures and administrative cost. I worry a great deal about how much money we spend on administrative costs as opposed to monies going directly into services. Dr. Stevens, maybe you can help clarify things from a more realistic standpoint. You testified that any setting a child is in, whether it be their home, a child care center, or a preschool, is inherently both caring for and educating that child. And I remember very well the head of Smart Start in North Carolina telling me long ago, when children are playing, they're learning. That their play is their work, and they're learning. Do you agree that we should not focus on whether the programs are overlapping or duplicative, but instead consider all of the programs as inherently serving the same purpose of caring for and educating children?
One of the things that I find most exciting about this area of policy, the area of early care and education, there's no other area of policy that I know of that has such a strong body of science that so clearly points us in the right direction. And to me, that's where we need to be starting. So what the science is telling us very clearly is that from the moment of birth, children are learning continuously and rapidly wherever they are and from whomever they're with. It does not matter what we call it. It doesn't matter what its funding stream is. It doesn't matter what building it's occurring in. We can't stop them from learning. So the question is only the quality of that environment. I think the best way for us to be thinking about this is from a child, ultimately from a child-centered point of view, focusing starting at birth, which is when there are 4 million infants, 4 million children every single year begin and end their infancy. And what we know from science is that that is the most critical period of learning. So the bottom line is we need to be relying on the science to be making these decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the chairlady. Mr. Polis, you're
Point
recognized.
of parliamentary inquiry.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask whether the GAO report, which was literally just made available to the Democrats and was not made available 48 hours ahead of the appearance of this hearing, whether the delay in the delivery of that is a violation of Rule 7, subsection D.
I thank the gentleman for his inquiry. It is not.
Okay, and if I may speak to the parliamentary inquiry for a moment briefly, I just want to express the dissatisfaction of the Democrats, and we obviously aren't ready to discuss the GAO report because we haven't read it. It was literally just made available moments ago, so perhaps there can be a future hearing, and that addresses, of course, much of Ms. Barnes' testimony. We're happy to engage on the other topics, but obviously we haven't had the chance to read this yet.
Noted. You have questions. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Dr. Harris, I want to thank you again for being here today from Colorado and everything you do for Colorado's children as a practitioner. As you know, in Colorado, we don't have full-day kindergarten for all of our students. Now, we've made progress in recent years. It's my understanding about 77% of kindergartners are attending full-day. Many parents pay for that, of course. Those that do have access either live in communities that have full-day kindergarten, they pay for it either through their own tax revenue or just out of pocket in tuition. That being said, there's still over 20,000 kindergartners that are not enrolled in full day. Mile High Learning serves some of the neediest students in Denver. Do most of your students make a seamless transition to a full day kindergarten? Yeah. And statewide, is there a similar picture, or are there inconsistencies across our patchwork of communities across our state?
Thank you, Mr. Polis. There is inconsistency actually across the state. There's been a commitment to try to get full-day K. In Denver, we have a great relationship with Denver Public Schools, so most of our children do transition to full-day kindergarten.
What can be done to support the continuity between early learning and K-12? What more can we do in our state and nationally?
So part of the ESSA is to do those kinds of coordinations, so really to align what's happening in early childhood with what's happening in our local educational agencies. And one specific is to help with transition. So as children are coming into public school, into kindergarten, after finishing preschool, that there are activities, professional development for staff. So there's a number of things, and it's really looking at the continuum of childcare from birth to 8, and thinking of professionals who are in the workforce as professionals.
And along those lines, you mentioned in your testimony the shortage of high-qualified early childhood education teachers. You referenced the average compensation of around $11 an hour. We all know how hard it is to have that as your vocation and support yourself. Research shows us that the result is nearly half of child care workers actually rely on public assistance to make ends meet. In Colorado means many child care workers are themselves eligible for the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program. What does that mean for teacher turnover? How does it affect quality that the average rate is about $11 an hour?
Well, we know in addition to the wages being low, that compensation, so thinking of health care, time off, paid sick leave, that kind of thing, really impacts especially many of our staff who come from similar situations as those families that we serve. Sorry, I don't remember the
And
rest.
what does it do to turnover rates and your ability to retain good early childhood educators?
So I would say, in general, if we don't have childcare, continuity of childcare for any parent, so our teachers, but also parents who are working, then the turnover rate impacts the employment as well as the development of children.
What can we do at the local, state, and federal level to support early childhood teachers and try to establish a greater respect and support for the profession?
I think it's a great opportunity now. Head Start has taken the lead in ensuring that at least 50% of teachers have a bachelor's degree. We really need to focus on professional development because that is interaction between children and their teachers is how they have great outcomes, that supports brain development. So treating teachers as professionals, currently childcare teachers are defined as hourly workers.
Dr. Stevens, you recently published a report making the business case for high-quality childcare, which I very much enjoyed. On July 3rd, the Wall Street Journal published a story that compared women's participation in the labor force and its implication on economic growth. I wanted to ask you, based on your research, can you briefly explain why investments in childcare are simply a wise decision for our economy and economic growth?
Yes, as I addressed in a report that was released a couple of weeks ago, really, as I mentioned in my testimony, childcare serves multiple purposes. So, first of all, we know we're laying the groundwork for children's lifelong learning and success from kindergarten through their own participation in the workforce. And secondly, it enables parents to participate, to work, which enables them to be self-sufficient and contributes to overall economic well-being of communities.
So you draw the numbers both from increased workforce participation, which, for instance, you have an example in Canada, which has led to more women working, as well as, of course, the longer-term benefit, which is the child themselves receiving it. Both of those are factors?
Correct.
Okay, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Ms. Handel, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of the witnesses here today. My question is for Ms. Moss. You explained in your testimony how important it is for families to choose the type of care that is right for them and for their child, whether that be the location, the schedule, cultural connections, teaching methods, and other very important aspects of the program. Do you think it is appropriate, more so or less so, for Congress to specify and dictate these aspects of a program, or have you found that it is more important for each community and program to be able to determine and tailor what it works best in that community for those families?
Thank you for your question. So from our perspective, we don't support either Congress or local governments controlling program choice. We support individual parents controlling program choice and really having input into what is on offer in their community. And Dr. Harris mentioned some of this in her testimony. There are a ton of variables in play, in particular as you think about childcare also as a workforce support. So the location, close to work, close to home, what makes the most sense for you, the hours. We see in a lot of instances in Minnesota, workers in light manufacturing or food processing working second shift. We need to provide services to those families. It's really difficult to know or to set kind of a one-size-fits-all in terms of schedule or programming or the programming options that are on offer. So from our perspective, we need to give parents a wider range of high-quality program choices and let them choose because they're in the best position to know what works for them.
Thank you. It seems to me that that would be an important aspect of a child-centered approach that would most succeed.
Ms. Handel, would I be able to, I just wanted to share about Head Start.
Actually, thank you. I have a second question. I don't want to use up my time for Dr. Stevens. When you gave your testimony, you talked a lot about science and research. And I was interested in understanding from you how best to promote rigorous research that would increase the knowledge about what works best for children and families. What general questions would that research answer? And what information are we currently lacking? And how will that benefit the states and local programs in making the best decisions for a child-centered program?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the science tells us is general principles of what's crucial for child development. But for example, one of the questions that we really don't know much about is, we know that the adults working with children are the crucial factor for the development of young children. The physical plant curriculum is not really what matters for children under 5. What we don't know is how to identify and develop the kinds of professionals who will be effective with young children. What's clear from K-12 is that graduate degrees in no way ensure high-quality teaching. So my background is in K-12. As a matter of fact, my background is in teacher quality and preparation. I think we have an opportunity to learn from the mistakes that K-12 has made and approach this in a different way. I don't want to underestimate, I don't want to be underestimating how important the quality of that person is, but we just don't know enough about how to find the right people and how to prepare them to be effective with young kids.
Great, thank you so much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I think the gentlewoman, Ms. Fudge, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Not here. No, we had him crossed out. Are we asking questions? Mr. Scott, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Ms. Bonamici, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Polis, for holding this hearing, and thank you to our witnesses. Like many of my colleagues, I've visited many programs in Northwest Oregon: Head Start, child care centers, child care homes, pre-kindergarten programs. I was recently out at the Hillsboro, Oregon Head Start, and one of the things that I really appreciate about Head Start is the family engagement piece too. It's really meaningful, and I hear support for high-quality early childhood programs everywhere I go, and even here this morning. And that's one of the reasons why I was so troubled to see that this administration is proposing cutting hundreds of millions of dollars for early childhood programs, including child care development block grants, Head Start, preschool development grants. And I'm pleased that the House appropriators are so far ignoring many of these proposals, but I am concerned about Congress's long-term commitment to early childhood programs in light of all the research and all the success. I also want to note that the current health care legislation proposes to slash Medicaid, and that jeopardizes services for children, including children with disabilities, both in early childhood and in school settings. And I recently met with the president of the Oregon Pediatric Society, who's extremely concerned about that. So that the federal investment in early childhood programs is essential. It's meaningful. Of course, programs need to be of high quality to have a lasting benefit, and high-quality programs require significant resources. And it is a wise investment, because we know children who get a strong start are more likely to succeed, less likely to need safety net programs later. There are still, however, many eligible families who continue to go unserved, and I asked that question when I was visiting Head Start. There's a lot of unmet need out there. So clearly there's a role for us here. And I want to note, I don't think anybody supports funding duplicative overlapping programs. We all want to work to make sure that we're expanding access and making sure that the resources are going to the families in need. If we can make these programs better and more accessible, let's do that. We can do that in a bipartisan way, similar to the bipartisan child and adult care food program bill that Representative Stefanik and I have reintroduced, streamlining the program, making kids eligible for a third meal when they're in childcare. Dr. Harris, I wanted to start by asking you to go ahead and respond to, you wanted to say something about Ms. Handel's question regarding choice, and I want to give you that opportunity.
Thank you. Head Start sets high-quality standards, but part of that is to be responsive to the community that they're in. So there's a structure and a framework that ensures that teachers are qualified, that there's comprehensive services, but you also then respond to if you're in the inner city, if you're in a farming community. So it really does help support parental choice.
And I appreciate that. And constituents in my district, many of them benefit from high-quality migrant and seasonal Head Start programs. The children and families who participate in those programs benefit, and so does the local economy, which relies on a productive agriculture sector. So I want to ask you about that, but I also want to talk about the whole child approach. Certainly, we know that's important. I introduced or authored, it hasn't been reintroduced yet this year, but a bipartisan resolution demonstrating support for a whole child approach to education, social, emotional, and physical well-being. There's some great examples of that happening in Oregon. Earl Boyles Elementary School, for example, benefits from those strong community partnerships. Preschool programs, there's access to housing resources, home visits, adult education programs, community health professionals, a food pantry, and after-school learning opportunities, and it really makes a difference. So can you talk about the importance, Dr. Harris, of addressing all of the needs of families and children and the long-term benefits of that? And then I also want you to address the importance of tailoring services like the migrant and seasonal Head Start programs. And go ahead.
Yes.
Before we
So children, as they're developing, it's not just cognitive, it's physical, it's social, emotional. Some children have different levels of needs, which is why the community partners are important, as well as the relationship that we have with school districts and IDEA. Children are learning to think. And so it's not just about learning ABCs, it's about how to problem solve, how to have self-regulation skills. And communities, again, are different. So the migrant Head Start programs are really clearly focused on working with the children so that the children have a place to go, a place to be educated. The other thing I just wanted to add is that Head Start also is not, it asks the community to be engaged. There's a 25% in-kind match. So the idea is that communities really want to provide this kind of service to their children and families.
I thank the gentlewoman.
Time is
Gentlewoman's
expired.
time
Thank you,
has
Mr. Chairman.
expired. She yields back. Mr. Garrett, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am delighted that yourself and the committee chair have seen fit to bring these fine individuals in for questions today. I think one of the existential challenges, and I use that word intentionally, existential, facing America is the denial of a fundamental entitlement of American birth, and that is the entitlement to an opportunity. That happens to manifest itself, I would argue, by virtue of geography or one's zip code, right? It's the belief of this member that no child, based on any external factor, is any less capable of success than another child, and yet we see pattern after pattern where our children aren't failing our schools, but instead our schools are failing our children. That is, that it's predictable based on zip code, perhaps, that one child's far more likely to achieve post-secondary degrees than another by virtue of where they grew up. And what I've observed, Mr. Chair, members of the panel, is that there are all too many times a reverse correlation between per pupil expenditures and outcomes, and that we work systematically in some sectors to deny parents the fundamental opportunity to ensure that their children are enrolled in institutions where there's a high probability of success. And so I guess I say that to lead into the 2010 HHS study that was entitled the Head Start Impact Study, that concluded that Head Start, quote, had little or no positive effects for children who were granted access, and that for the four-year group compared similarly situated children not allowed access to Head Start, the program failed to raise cognitive abilities on 41 measures, specifically language skills, literacy, math, and school performance of the participation. All of the children all failed to improve. Alarmingly, Head Start for the 3-year-old group actually had a harmful effect on the teacher-assessed math ability of those children once they entered kindergarten. Teachers reported that non-participating children were more prepared in math skills than those who participated in Head Start. So I think it's fair to say that what we do in this body should be judged not on its intent, oh, they meant well, but on its outcomes, and that the outcomes should be determined based on not how the child does in kindergarten or first grade, but how they do when they're 22, when they're 32, when they're 42. So I would ask first, Ms. Stevens, where parents are afforded more choices as it relates to the educational opportunities available to their children, do we not see actual better outcomes in educational and life achievement amongst those children? In other words, if you're in a failing school district but you're afforded the opportunity to go somewhere else, is that child not more likely to be successful than if you're not allowed to go somewhere else?
My research focus is on the preschool years, so birth through 4. The same principles apply. I think one of the very important things for us to remember is that there are millions of children who today are entering full-time childcare as infants. By the time they enter kindergarten, many children have been in childcare for over 11,000 hours. What we know is that those hours are having a tremendous impact on their development. A full day, full year pre-K program is a little over 1,000 hours. Most Head Start for 4-year-olds, and the science is clear that the most important period of development actually occurs before children turn 4. A full-time Head Start program, again, most of the children in Head Start are 4, some are 3. The majority of those programs are less than 500 hours. So again, the science is making this very clear. When children are spending 11,000 hours starting in infancy in particular environments, those are the environments we need to look at. Unlike K-12, I would suggest that for low-income parents, the problem they're facing is actually a lack of choice, because they don't have the resources and they don't have the information to make good choices.
And so the uniform product that's held out to individuals who face that lack of choice historically hasn't been successful. I guess the easy question is there a better way to do this? And I've only got 35 seconds.
There are some places where probably Head Start is the best option that children have. And I don't support taking that away from children when that's their best option. What we're seeing is a growing number of states who are stepping up and are providing a broader range of options.
So I got 15 seconds with absolutely no intent to be rude. I think the point is that historically and foundationally by this nation's charter, if you will, this has been the manifest responsibility of localities and states, and that if we empower localities and states to endeavor to create a better product, we'll find better products than Head Start. And so what we might be thinking about is how to allow people at the local level to determine what's best for their children. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank the gentleman. Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman, Virginia, Mr. Scott's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me follow through on that, Dr. Stevens. Head Start is different. It's different qualities to it than some other early childhood education programs. It's actually housed in Health and Human Services because it provides a lot of other services. You indicated that would be the best choice for some parents. Who would benefit better by Head Start than other early childhood education programs? Dr. Stevens?
Head Start is a funding stream built around a set of ideas. What's important about that program are the ideas. There's nothing more magical about it being called Head Start than fourth grade. What we know is some fourth grades work very well for children, and other fourth grades don't work well for children. The principles are always the same. The question is the implementation. And what we know is that the more hours that children are in environments and the younger they are, the bigger the impact it's going to be having on their development, and the more important focusing on quality is. So Head Start is one way of approaching that.
And is the benefit more profound with low-income rather than upper-income children?
The research is clear. Why is that? The reason for that is children in more advantaged environments are in fact getting a great deal of investment starting an infancy at home in terms of the developmental support they're getting at home. So what early childhood programs do, and in fact what childcare is doing, for better or for worse, is supplementing what's going on at home. So if what's going on at home is for whatever reason insufficient, and then children are in poor childcare environments, you're exacerbating the problem, right? So the principles are going to be the same, and we need to be focusing on the principles and what those do for children.
Thank you. Ms. Mass, you indicated that your program is designed to eliminate the achievement gap by 5. What do you do to try to achieve that goal?
Thank you. Yeah, so as I said in my remarks, we're really focused on a set of principles that are about starting early. So this year, Minnesota's legislature opened the opportunity of early learning scholarships to infants and toddlers who are in foster care or are homeless or in the child protection system, offering, full day, multiple years. Children who receive scholarships keep them until they enter kindergarten, trying to ensure continuity for families. Portability is a very important principle. So as families move because of changes in home or location, those dollars follow the child to make sure that they're stable in a new high-quality environment. Of course, insisting on quality. This is a movement that's happening around the country and in Minnesota as well. What are the ingredients to a high-quality early care education setting? How can we support the existing provider base in offering those best practices?
Have you evaluated for results? Have you been able to achieve your goal?
We have not been able to achieve our goal. We are continuously evaluating for results. I think the thing that we have that has been more elusive is getting all of the ingredients in place at the same time. So starting early, stabilizing children in high-quality programs for multiple years.
And do you have long-term evaluations of your initiatives?
Yeah, so the private sector in Minnesota has invested about, $1 million or more over time in evaluating. We're committed to continuing that evaluation, and we feed that evaluation back into the programs to improve them.
Thank you. Does somebody on the panel know about Part C under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Part C of...
Yes.
Can you talk about the importance of investments under Part C?
Yes, they focus on children from birth to 3. You create an individualized family services plan. So the idea is that, again, you're engaging families as well as specialists in supporting the development of their children. And it's a very specific, defined disability in order to qualify for that program.
Do you have early intervention before disabilities have manifest?
Yes, so all of the children in Head Start are screened as soon as they enter the program and assessed ongoing throughout the year so that we can provide those intervention services.
Thank the gentleman. Gentleman's time has expired. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Let me start first with Ms. Barnes. On older reports on this subject at hand today, we found that those reports said, quote, fragmentation and program overlap can create an environment in which programs may not serve children and families as efficiently or effectively as possible, end quote, and that, quote, this existence of multiple programs can create an added administrative cost, such as costs associated with determining eligibility and meeting varied reporting requirements, unquote. Are we still adding cost to programs in terms of your latest review? What do you find? Do we still have a variety of programs that might not be serving children and families as efficiently and effectively as possible, or did we clean all that up?
Yes, sure. Our 2012 review was based on the 2010 information, but our current one is based on the fiscal year 2015 obligations, and it was $15 billion with the programs that we're talking about today. Back then, there were 12 programs with an explicit early learning or child care purpose, 33 that allow funds to be spent on such activities, and 5 tax expenditures. So a little different from what we found this time, which we found in 9 explicit purpose programs, 35 that allow early learning or child care spending, and 3 tax expenditures. But for this review, we actually removed 6 programs that were no longer either funded or for various other reasons, such as Race to the Top, Early Learning Challenge. And we added an additional 8 programs that were not part of our 2012 review, such as preschool development grants. So there are some differences to address that question.
Differences. Does that mean better or worse?
In terms of better
Duplication and costs and all that?
We looked at the performance of the programs on a very
So you didn't look at duplication or anything like that?
not in terms of overall. We do have some of that. We did identify that in our report. We talk about some of the programs that do overlap. In terms of duplication, we identify potential duplication, and I can explain some of that. Some of the programs have a limited requirement for data, so it's difficult to determine whether there's actual duplication.
So there's 44 programs?
There's 44 programs.
And and you can't tell which ones are likely overlapping or duplicative in nature?
Well, some are overlapping. I gave a couple of examples earlier.
that's what I thought.
Yes, like Head Start and preschool development grants. If you're looking at whether they have similar goals, activities, or target similar populations, yes, they both target low-income children under 5 and provide slots for early learning.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Stevens and Ms. Moss, today we heard that there are a multitude of federal programs. Some may be a disservice to the American family, business owner, and taxpayer. We've also heard examples of state and local innovation, which are clearly better at meeting the needs of those involved, in my opinion. As we look to reform the system, is there a better way Congress should provide assistance to states to make it easier at the local level? We'll start with you, Dr. Stevens.
A number of the new programs that the GAO report has identified are, in fact, successful federal efforts to promote state leadership in this area. Not all states are equally interested in or committed to early childhood at this point.
I heard you say that.
There are a number of states that are not only far ahead of where they were in 1965, they're far ahead of where the federal government is now. To me, what makes the most sense is Colorado is one, Minnesota is one, Indiana is one, North Carolina is one. We have a number of these states. If we can find ways to leverage federal funds to highlight and support that state momentum, those states can be very valuable models for the country.
Are you proposing some kind of incentive procedure or something? When you think we can find ways, that's my question. What would be the ways?
I have written about one possible approach to this, which would be what I have suggested would be a fairly small pilot project to give a handful of states, I mean, there's a number of them represented here, the opportunity for a period of experimentation where they get money if the money is held to high standards.
Interesting. Could you submit that for the record? You said this is a separate report you did, or?
Correct. I can provide that.
Would you mind providing that?
Yes.
And I'd like to see it entered in the official record if we could. My time's expired, so I can't make the rules up here and then not follow them, unfortunately. So Ms. Moss, we can't get to you to answer that question. And Dr. Harris, same thing. So with that, I want to thank the witnesses again for answering the questions. I don't see any more members to ask questions, so we'll go to Mr. Polis for his closing statement.
Thank you. And I do want to highlight actually what our chair was talking about with Dr. Stevens is the Race to the Top Early Childhood Learning Challenge Grant Program. So that was the program and also included in the testimony. I want to thank Chairman Rokita and our witnesses for joining us, in particular those who had to travel, Dr. Harris and Ms. Moss. Thank you for coming all the way to our nation's capital. As our witnesses shared, the science behind the benefits of early learning is undeniable, and I'm glad that today's hearing really focused around the most effective way to deliver those services. It's critical that children receive high-quality early childhood education at the earliest ages. Dr. Harris, thanks for your good work in Colorado, and thank you for sharing with us the work you're doing at Mile High Early Learning Center and the way that you're creatively using the different federal programs to meet the individual needs of young learners. She also spoke to the importance and value of each program and the need to maintain federal support for these programs. After today's discussion, I want to make sure that we carefully tread in the area of eliminating duplicative programs. The GAO report, and obviously we haven't had a chance to see the new one, but the previous one has not found significant duplication of early childhood learning programs. Duplicative means that they overlap, often towards the same goal. It's not the same as a recommendation that one program would better replace two. Overlapping goals, parameters of programs can be adjusted, and sometimes it takes several programs working together to meet a common goal. But I want to be clear that that overlapping is not the same as a word that is not contained in at least the prior version of the report. We haven't read this one, like redundant. It's apparent after learning from Colorado and Minnesota that there is variation in how states and local governments determine and successfully create affordable early learning systems, which makes the case that there is flexibility in federal regulations. And if there's a meaningful way to work to improve that, we certainly look forward to working with our Republican colleagues to do that. The ounce, whose report Ms. Stevens cited in her testimony, describes the complexity created by state-imposed, non-federally mandated regulations. It's important to highlight that these issues regard compliance, not governance or program efficacy or integrity, and those are very different. Congressional Democrats are thinking through ways to support high-quality early learning and whatever we can do to help states fill the gaps that my home state in Colorado is not unique, unfortunately, in having. Early learning, quality childcare, not just an education issue, it's a jobs issue, it's a workforce issue, very much in the purview of this committee's other work. Affordable childcare and early childhood education empowers workers, allows people to re-enter the workforce sooner, and of course, equips future generations with the foundational tools that they need for success in life. Democrats are currently working on a bold, visionary early learning proposal to allow working and middle-class families to access quality, affordable early learning and care opportunities. And I strongly believe that support for early learning is a bipartisan issue, and we look forward to working with our Republican colleagues. And I invite my Republican colleagues to work with Democrats on supporting early childhood education, and I look forward to working with the Republicans towards this goal. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank the witnesses again for your time today. We continue up here to learn a lot from you, and so we appreciate it. We also appreciate the fact that you're on the front lines of this issue, and at least for two of our witnesses, three, they're on the front lines with the kids, right, with the children right there. And again, as I said at the beginning of this hearing, the children are this country's most important asset in so many different ways, however you want to define that. So I really appreciate and applaud the work that each of you are doing. Of course, Representative Polis, you have our commitment to work together on this issue. It is very important. Nothing can replace a family bringing up a child, especially at those early years, from the environment from where they first start learning, as Dr. Stevens says. But with environment today, with working parents, and everything else going on, there certainly is. The science tells us, right, that there's a role for early childhood learning, child care, and the differences between two have been exposed. Those two have been exposed in this hearing as well, and I think that was a very important difference, and that needs to be considered carefully as we move forward. We have to make sure, as fiduciaries of the taxpayers' funds, not our property, their property, that these programs, whatever adjective you want to assign to them, are being used the most efficient way possible. That is our duty. That is what Congress's Article I powers are. Those duties won't be suspended here on this subcommittee, for sure, as long as I'm the chairman of it. So with that, we'll take your information, your testimony, and move forward with legislative policy on this matter. Seeing no other business before the committee, I want to again, lastly, thank the witnesses, thank the members for coming today, and I see this committee as remaining adjourned.